Alright, mapagpalang hapon po sa ating mga tagapakinig. Welcome po sa ating programang Sulong na Bayan at tayo po'y dinig sa iba't pang panig ng mundo. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening as case may be. Lalo na po dyan sa Gitang Silangan. Hello po dyan sa Qatar, sa Jeddah, sa Riyadh, sa Kingdom of Saudi Arabia at sa ating mga neighboring countries. Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, malakas din po tayo sa Myanmar at ganyan rin po sa Down Under, sa Australia at syempre sa Hong Kong. At dito naman sa ating bansa, syempre po, Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, lalong-lalo po sa ating mga kapatid na Muslim. Assalamu alaikum. Naku, excited po tayong malaman itong ating magiging usapin. I-welcome na natin sa ating segmento para matikman natin yung kanyang ngipin. Yung kagat ng kanyang ngipin. Lagot kayo. Welcome to our segment, syempre po, sa Ngipin ng Batas with Attorney CHEL DIOKNO. Hello po.
Hello, Lolly, at hello sa lahat na nanonood at makikinig sa kahit anong sulok ng mundo ng mga kababayan. Kumusta na kayo? I hope you're all safe and healthy. Ako rin ay excited ngayon dahil alam mo, iba ang magiging role ko ngayon. Hindi ako ngayon ang sasagot. Ako ang magtatanong.
Ikaw talagang host. True blue na host na tatanungin niya. Mukhang wala pa po sa kabilang linya, but ang ating usapin, Attorney CHEL, kasi nga, election na po. Yan na yan. Alam natin. Ang daming mga developments na nangyayari. Ito na, mukhang may malaking lawyer na sumali na sa sa pagdepensa sa isa sa mga presidentiables. Ano po yung nakikita nyo? Kasi ito na po yung, dyan na tayo papunta election lawyering. Dapat ba talaga ang abogado ay mayroong malaking role para idepensa yung mga petition for disqualification, petition to deny due course, mga protesta? Go ahead po. I-educate na lang kami.
Siyempre, napakahalaga niyan yung election laws natin. Dahil mismong demokrasya natin ang nakataya pagdating sa halalan. Kaya nga tayo isang demokrasya dahil tayo na mismo ang nagpipili kung sino ang magiging mga pangulo at pangalawang pangulo, senador natin at mga kongresista. Ako nga mismo, alam mo, meron akong regret sa aking practice kasi hindi ako talaga humahawak ng election cases. Specialized field yan Iba talaga yung pag-aaral ng election law. At wala naman talaga mga lumapit sa akin na mga kliyenteng gustong na may mga kasong ganyan. Kaya nga po pati ako pag meron akong questions tungkol sa election law, syempre ang kinukonsulta ko yung mga magagaling at marurunong mga expert dyan. Kumbaga sa mga doktor, kung meron mga neurosurgeon, meron mga heart specialist, sa mga lawyer din, meron din ganyan. Masasabi ko siguro ako ay specialist pagdating sa mga court cases, litigation, human rights. Pero pagdating sa election law, naku, pati ako magtatanong sa mga ibang mga abogado. But it's so important. Kasi nga, ako nga mismo, meron sana akong gusto mga tanong. At gusto rin iklaro tungkol sa mga batas natin. Dahil baka naman meron dapat tayong amendahan o palitan sa existing na laws.
Siguro nandiyan na rin lang po tayo sa sinasabi niyong papalitan o amyendahan. Ano yung nakikita niyong napaka-glaring? Kasi nagagalit na po ang sambayanan sa totoo lang. Dahil ito nga, napaka-glaring nitong huling pagpasok ni Attorney Estelito Mendoza. Sabihan na natin ang pangalan kasi public knowledge naman po yan. Yung opinion niyo lang po, personal, Attorney CHEL. Kasi alam na po ng lahat, pag yan ang kinuha mong lawyer, medyo kakaiba. Ibig sabihin, ano po siya impression sa kanya pag hinandle niya, somehow, quote-unquote, may konting pagkakasala or something. Yun po yung opinion ng iba. In your opinion, ano po yan? Yan po yung development ngayon Habang wala pa si Atty. Maranyon.
Ang gusto kong malaman ay tungkol sa substitution of candidates, tapos tungkol din sa yung mga requirements pa sa pag-file ng COC o Certificate of Candidacy. Dahil doon ata nakatutok ang petition na hawak nga ni Atty. Mendoza. Meron din akong gusto itanong tungkol sa party list kasi di ba yung party list parang naging
5-5.
Abuso
na. Ayan. Talk about abuso, siguro masasagot na po at nasa kabilang linya na via Zoom ang ating expert. Sabi niyo nga po, siya po ang expert sa field. Very quickly, sabihin ko lang kung sino siya. This lawyer specializes on automated election litigation and advising. He's one of the country's rising election lawyers with 8 years of solid election experience. And then under the tutelage of the eminent election lawyer Sixto Brillantes Jr., he practiced in almost all election tribunals from municipal Municipal Trial Courts, Regional Trial Courts, COMELEC, House of Representatives Electoral Tribunal, and the Presidential Electoral Tribunal. Handling clients, which includes some of the country's most prominent politicians. Siyempre, kasama po dyan ang Pangulong Benigno Aquino, the former Benigno Noynoy Aquino, at siyempre si Mr. Duterte din, nung siya po ay Vice President. Let's welcome to our program no less than Attorney Emil Marañon III. Hello po.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. At saka proud lawyer din po ako ni Dean CHEL. Kaya...
Hello, Emil.
Ang dami nang tatanong sa iyo ni Attorney CHEL. Go ahead po. Yung
Yes,
kanina
po.
sinasabi niyo na substitution. Go ahead, Attorney CHEL.
Hi, Emil. Simulan natin doon sa issues tungkol sa substitution. Kasi iba maraming nababahala ngayon na bakit daw na meron pang ganyan. Ano bang kasaysayan yan? Paano nag-evolve itong rules on substitution?
Okay. So, ang earliest, mula noon, even our first election law no 1947, there are already rules of substitution. However, in the 1947 election code, that the grounds are only two, that's death and disqualification. So, the withdrawal, substitution by reason of withdrawal, I think come later, mga around 1970s. But from the 70s until, may dalawa pang election law, I think, na-carry out yan until 1985 Omnibus Election Code, which still applies now. So currently, there are three grounds for substitution, which is withdrawal, death, and disqualification. So tatlo yan. In other words, matagal na nag-e-exist yung rules of substitution, but it so happened na nasimulan itong parang laruin only in 2016.
Alright.
And nauso na siya until the recent filing. But if you look at it, the law has been there since the 70s actually.
Dapat ba amyandahin yan, Attorney CHEL or Attorney Emil? Masyadong glaring na yan, hindi na makatarungan sa karamihan ng opinion ng iba.
Yun nga ang tanong ko rin kasi wala akong problema sa disqualification or death. Kasi talaga naman, okay lang, mukha naman just yun na pag namatay yung kandidato, na-disqualify, nasa ayaw niya, ay pwede siyang i-substitute. Pero palagay ko, yung issue talaga doon, yung withdrawal Kasi yun nga yung nagagamit mula 2016 hanggang sa existing natin election. Ano tingin mo, Emil?
Well, unang-una, ako kasi ang tingin ko dyan, ang tao, may karapatan naman na magpalit ng isip. Because we all know that hindi biro yung election. Magastos, kakain ng oras. So some people actually after filing would have like napapag-isip at saka sometimes biglang natakot ay baka hindi ko kayanin. So there are legitimate reasons why why candidates withdraw. But at the same time, I think yung problema dito is hindi really yung substitution, but yung sistema ng placeholder. Kasi ang substitution nangyayari lang because merong nauso ngayon na tinatawag na placeholder. So ibig sabihin, they do not have the bona fide intention to join the election, but they only file the COC para to hold a slot for a particular candidate with the intention of withdrawing later on. Actually, the placeholders na to are by law pasok sa definition ng nuisance candidate. Meaning, you have no bona fide intention to join the election, but only to hold a slot for a political party. So I think yung solution na pinopropose ko is actually hindi mo kailangan i-amend yung batas.
Okay.
COMELEC will simply have to implement its rules as regards nuisance candidates. For example, may placeholder ang isang political party. Before it can substitute, actually, COMELEC is mandated to complete first the nuisance proceedings. I-declare mo, i-clear mo na siya, hindi siya nuisance, and that's the time that you should approve the substitution. So that's the only way that we can actually prevent yung withdrawal na to. It's not really the withdrawal and substitution, but the concept of placeholders na nauso since 2016. Yung dapat tingnan natin.
So kung ganyan di dapat meron na tayong isasampang kaso dahil hindi pala nila sinusunod for the longest time. Itong mga nangyayaring to, glaring na violation yan, Attorney Emil. Hindi nila chine-check no since pasok yan doon sa sinasabi mo. Tama ba?
In fact, most of them, even yung mga yung na-substitutan last week.
Ito lang.
All of them have, to my knowledge, they have a pending case sa COMELEC on nuisance because automatic naman yan sa COMELEC na pag president or vice president, pag pa-filean ka agad mo to proprio ng COMELEC ng nuisance case. So I don't know lang kung tatapusin pa yun or i-treat nila as smooth in academic because substituted na. But if you really follow the law, dapat tapusin muna because a nuisance candidate cannot be substituted. Yun yung rule eh.
So unfair naman yan, Attorney Chel, di ba? Kasi all the time, alam mo naman, the back of your mind, ayaw mo naman pala talagang tumakbo, may naantay ka lang na pwedeng pagbigyan. Or hindi yan nasa sa loob mo. Is that like a violation, glaring violation? Pwede bang kasuhan naman ang COMELEC? Is that allowed? Paano yun?
Interesting issue yan, kasi kung nuisance candidate sila or potential nuisance candidate sila, dapat yun ang unang issue na talakayin ng ating COMELEC bago silang pumayag na i-substitute yung kandidatong yun. Kasi kung ang intention lang naman niya ay maging placeholder lang, then obviously wala siyang talagang balak na tumakbo dun sa position na yun. That is something that we can look into. So, pero maganda yung nabanggit ni Ate Emil na it's really a question of whether COMELEC should be implementing its rules on nuisance candidates. At maganda rin siguro may tanong natin mismo sa COMELEC yan, paano ba? Halimbawa, may kandidato na sasabihin niya na although I want to run, I'm willing to give my place to someone else. Di ba parang indication na rin yun?
Admission.
Yes, parang admission yun eh.
So is that allowed? Pwede po pala yan, Attorney Emil? Na
Actually,
sasabihin mo na, okay, tatakbo ko pero meron ako inaantay pa eh.
Actually, sa totoo lang, admission against interest eh.
See?
So actually, when you make a public statement saying na wala naman talagang intention na tumakbo, so that proves
what's the point?
That proves na wala kang intention, bona fide intention to actually join the election. Yun yung batayan ng batas para i-declare ka ng nuisance o hindi. Gusto mo ba talaga sumali sa election? Or are you just holding that slot for a particular candidate na hindi pa makapag-decide? So I think yun yung solusyon for COMELEC to in a way put some sort of a process sa substitution. Hindi lang automatic because na-substitutan, then wala nang issue. I think kailangan muna i-settle yung issue whether yung candidate ba na originally nag-file, is he a nuisance candidate or not? So I think the moment na lagyan ng proseso ng COMELEC, all of these circles can actually be prevented in the upcoming elections, in the next elections.
Again, yun nga lang, very quickly. Go ahead, Attorney Chel, go.
Sorry, Lolly. Curious lang ako kay Attorney Emil, kung paano ba siya naipasok ko? How did you get involved or interested in working on election law? And by the way, sa lahat ng mga nanonood at nakikinig, kung meron kayong tanong, nandito yung expert natin, kaya magkakataon na natin yan.
Mali na kayo, right.
Interested lang ako kasi ako, although I wanted to do election law, I never really got into it eh. How was it for you?
Actually, ang nangyari, ang firm before ni Sixto Brillantes, I think all 8 partners are teachers, are my teachers sa San Beda. So one of them told me after graduation na mag-apply ka sa office because naghahanap to sila ng lawyer. So walang nag-a-apply doon masyado because mga terror sa law school. So ako lang naglakas ng loob na mag-apply. And when I did apply, inaccept naman ako ni Sixto and he assigned me personally sa kanya mismo. So ako yung naging assistant niya for 1 year. So pagpasok ko, it was already 2010 elections. So biglang napastabak ako bigla sa laban 2010 elections. So client namin at that time, si Noynoy, si Duterte for mayor sa Davao. So yun. Tapos 2011, he was appointed sa COMELEC as chairman. And at 25 years old, I became his chief of staff for 5 years. So doon ako natuto both from the perspective ng private practice in perspective naman as a regulator being part of COMELEC. So at the time, kami siyempre nagde-decide ng case. So it gave me a good balance between private practice at saka yung working in government as a government election lawyer. Because after noon, I went out on my own after COMELEC. I decided, sabi ko, boss, ang problema sa'yo, masyado kang sikat. So unless I start learning to fly on my own, then magiging assistant mo ako forever. Ayun. So I did left the office after COMELEC and I set up my own law firm and I started practicing election law under my own name.
So as election lawyer, anong duties talaga ng lawyers na katulad mo? What are your duties working directly for COMELEC?
At that time, I was the chief of staff of COMELEC, of the COMELEC chairman. So basically, I'm running the day-to-day affairs ng office. So dumadaan sa'yo cheque and vouchers na million, billion. And it takes a lot of responsibility to actually mag-due diligence ka. And we're very proud that we went out of the COMELEC without a single case. Considering the fact na lahat halos ng lumabas ng COMELEC, tadkad ng kaso sa ombudsman at saka sa kung ano-ano. But we're very proud that we came out of it, no issue, no cases filed, and lahat was in order. So, yun.
All right. May nagtatanong lang, Attorney CHEL kay Attorney Emil, do we have many private law firms specializing in election laws? Or in terms of earnings, Attorney Emil, how do they compare against corporation lawyers or criminal lawyers or other categories of law practitioners?
I think yung election lawyers now is around 6 or 7 lang sa Pilipinas na practicing full-time. I think magkakilala naman kami lahat because we always see each other. Sometimes kakampi mo sa isang kaso, the next day kaaway mo sa isang kaso. So it's quite a very small world. But yun, medyo mahirap kasi matutunan yung election law because number one, wala kang mababasang libro. Walang libro sa election law that will teach you how to practice. And second is that election laws are so complicated because ang daming, wala kasing, ang Omnibus Election Code, for example, is 1985 pa, and in between 1985 and now, tadkad siya ng amendments. So medyo delikado magbasa because hindi mo alam kung ano yung nabago na, anong napalitan na, ano yung COMELEC regulations. So it's something that you really learn firsthand. You learn it by experience. And ako siguro, if I have not been under Sixto Brillantes and I have not worked sa COMELEC, many of these things that I know, hindi ko din malalaman. And the election practice is an entirely different practice. For example, yung period sa COMELEC is short. Sa courts, 15 days ang normal na period to file, period to MR and all. COMELEC, for example, iba-iba yan. Pag party list, 3 days ang MR. Pag ordinary case, 5 days. Yun. So very short. And may time element kasi yan because election cases need to be resolved ASAP. So for example, bawal magpa-extend. So issue yan doon kay Bongbong Marcos. So sa amin, number one rule is there's no extension.
So how do you react to that? How do you react to that, Attorney CHEL at saka Attorney Emil? May an extension. Ang galing ng isang lawyer. Alam na natin kung sino siya. So what are your thoughts? Sabi mo, bawal.
It was unheard of. I mean, I've talked to a lot of former colleagues sa COMELEC, mga former commissioners. Sabi ko, have you ever granted an extension? Sabi nila, never namin nagawa yan. And ako, to my knowledge, wala pa akong alam na na-extend yung period to file answer. Because the summons itself says non-extendable. So, if it says non-extendable, I will never have the courage to actually file a motion for extension. Diba? So, yun.
There's always the first time. Go ahead, Attorney CHEL.
There's always the first time. Tama naman yung Lolly. Yung second part ng question ni Ate Lolly, yung how about the compensation? How is it compared to mga corporate lawyers and other specialized fields?
Ako kasi the way I see it, there are many cases actually na pro bono din. And so basically, ang concept ko is some of my paying clients would pay even for those cases na hindi ako nag-charge. Natuto kasi ako doon sa boss ko, Sixto Brillantes. Mahilig siya mag-file ng public interest cases if he feels that the case will bring out like a new jurisprudence or a very interesting case that will enrich our jurisprudence. So sometimes if nice ang storya, maganda yung issue, for example, then I take on a case even if walang bayad. Sometimes even if I pay my own money, for example. One example is the Duterte youth case. It was quite an important case. We lost that case eventually. They sit in Congress eventually. Nakaupo sila. But out of that case, COMELEC issued a new regulation, a party list, which actually adopted our arguments. So sometimes hindi mo din ma-measure yung success ng kaso dun sa whether nanalo ko or wala. But what impact have you made doon sa rules natin as regards to party list? So ang ganda kasi nung binasa ko yung bagong regulations ng COMELEC sa substitution sa party list, it was actually our arguments adopted by COMELEC. So in a way, validated naman yung effort at saka yung hirap namin doon na i-pursue yung kaso, even at our expense. And in terms of compensation, I think yun, may premium lang kami compared to other lawyers because unang-una, ang problema kasi is the moment na tumawag ka ng isang candidate, bawal ka nang hawakan yung potential palaban niya. So parang loss of potential income din yan. So kaya we charge higher than ordinary lawyers. And our work din kasi are seasonal. Tapos in an election we can only hold a certain number of clients then. So yun. So it's okay naman siya. I mean, it pays naman. But sabi ko nga nababalance din with my pro bono cases at saka yung pay cases ko.
May iba naman tayo ng konti, Emil. May tanong ako tungkol sa mga TV ads. Ito lang experience ko kasi in 2019, na parang dehadong mga kandidatong walang war chest na tinatawag compared to those who can afford to pay a lot for television ads. Paano ba nangyari yun na parang why is it na parang my impression that it's not a level playing field when it comes to TV ads?
Well, una-una kasi ang problema is that the mechanism adopted by law to quote-unquote make the field even for everyone is to put a cap. But there are many candidates actually na hindi nga problema yung cap eh. Ang problema nila is how even to raise the amount.
Ayun, kasama ako doon.
Hindi problema yung whether aabutin mo yung cap. So for me, yung solusyon ng batas as regards that na inequality among the candidates, yung lagyan mo ng cap, it doesn't address the problem na merong candidates na actually may pera at saka yung candidates sa wala. Pero ako ang solusyon ko nakikita kasi is to make election contribution more accessible to the public. Yun yung nakikita kong solusyon. Na katulad sa Amerika, for example, yung normal na tao kaya mag-contribute na $1, $10, diba? Small amounts. Under the present law sa Pilipinas, we have this strange requirement of tawag namin report of contribution or ROC. Ang report of contribution is that regardless of the amount that you contribute or you donate, you have to submit to COMELEC a notarized document. So, ang notarization pa lang is around 300 to 500 pesos yan. So, siya, prohibitive siya doon sa mass donation or crowdfunding. Because ang nakikita ko dito is the only way that you can make the playing field even is to allow people, yung masa, to actually finance the candidates that they find deserving. So sometimes kahit piso-piso lang yan, if millions of people would give you that amount, diba, it's easy to reach 200 million if with proper campaign at saka proper promotion, it can be done.
Okay, na-bring up ni Attorney CHEL yung TV ads. Eh, ito namang, limitations, may campaign limitations ba tayo, Attorney Emil, sa YouTube, TikTok, Instagram? Ano yan, meron ba?
Okay, so far, ang merong airtime limitation are only those TV and radio ads. So far, in terms of social media, ang tanging regulation ng COMELEC is as regards expense. So kung may ginastos ka or wala, it has to be reported sa SOSE. But as regards the frequency, placement, walang regulation ng COMELEC. In fact, it can be argued that hindi pwedeng i-regulate ng COMELEC yan because the laws that being involved here is the Fair Elections Act. This was passed 1997? So wala pa daw konsepto ng social media at that time. So how can you make implementing rules including social media na hindi naman siya na-envision ng batas? So that's one of the arguments that people would offer as regards that. But COMELEC presently has a set of rules regarding social media usage.
At least, malinaw, Ang last question siguro, another glaring ito, Attorney CHEL, sinasabi nila kasi yung malpractice much ahead of the election season is the premature campaigning of aspirants to various offices. And ang law sets the campaign period for Vice President, President, and Senators at 90 days before Election Day. Yet, to this day, the law is flagrantly violated. Shouldn't COMELEC do something about this or watch out for this sounding alarm, Attorney Emil?
Well, actually, i-correct ko lang yung statement. Actually, there is no prohibition to campaign at this point. Ang sa batas kasi before the passage of RA 9369, between the filing of the COC and the actual campaign period, bawal mangampanya.
Okay.
But with the passage of RA 9369, sinasabi doon that the person who filed the COC will not be treated as a candidate until the start of the campaign period. So meaning, naging legal impossibility yung premature campaigning because nga hindi ka naging candidate before the start of the campaign period. In fact, there was an actual case that went up to the Supreme Court,
right.
And this is the famous Penera versus COMELEC na case. So, inaccused siya ng premature campaigning, but the defense actually is hello?
Yeah, go ahead. The defense actually is what? We can hear you. Go ahead. All right. Nag-freeze. We have to pause for a break. Attorney CHEL, nag-freeze siya na. Because we really have to pause for a break. Babreak tayo pagka nandyan pa rin si Attorney Emil. But ikaw din, Attorney CHEL, you have to rejoin. Alright? Philippine Standard Time, 3:31 in the afternoon.
Si Miss Lolly Acosta, Sulong na Bayan sa DWIZ 882.
Alright, nagbabalik po muli ang ating programang Sulong na Bayan, syempre sa ating segmentong Sangipin ng Batas with Attorney CHEL DIOKNO. May mga questions na pumapasok. Sorry, Attorney Emil, medyo na-cut off ang ating kanina, So, ang tanong pong susunod kanina na nabanggit nyo, ayan na nga yung mga nangyayari. Can formal charge of the reliction of duty be filed against the COMELEC kung ganyan naman nuisance candidate? Hindi na, yan pa lang batas nila yan and yet they violate it.
I think siguro ang proper remedy doon is kung interesado ka sa kaso, is either you intervene or you file the necessary motion that na i-resolve muna nila before mag-allow ng substitution. Mas ganun siguro yung direction na dapat atake as against na filing cases against them. Especially considering na impeachable officers kasi yung members ng Commission and Bank. So it's a legal issue na hurdle kung pa-filean mo sila ng kaso na administrative cases.
Makakatulong ba, Emil, kung halimbawa maglagay tayo ng provision that if there is such an issue, they first determine the nuisance candidacy before they allow substitution? Pwede kaya yun?
Actually, sir, even if walang batas, but I think it's a prejudicial question because in the law, kasi pag nuisance candidate, hindi pwedeng substitute. So klaro naman yung sa batas na walang substitution pag nuisance. So if may pending case na nuisance yan, then it must be resolved first before i-allow yung substitution. So to my knowledge, for example, those candidates na pinag-substitute kanina, Sara Duterte and Bongo have pending nuisance cases sa COMELEC, and I don't know lang kung anong treatment noon after the substitution.
Okay, nasa kabilang linya via Zoom magtatanong din ang ating isang journalist, motoring columnist ng Tribune. Go ahead, Ceres. Shoot the question. Hello, Ceres. Are you there?
Hello.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay,
Hi,
go ahead.
everyone. Good afternoon, Attorney CHEL, Attorney Emil,
Hello,
Ms.
good afternoon.
Lolly. Hi. I just have a couple of questions. But actually, medyo na-touch on before ni Attorney CHEL and ni Attorney Emil with regard to the social media, kumbaga social media campaigning. As mentioned by Ms. Lolly, I am part of the motoring industry. So I write for a newspaper, one of the dailies for the motoring section. Pero prior to that, I was a YouTuber. In my YouTube, because I love to drive, I would guest people by, asking them to, let's hang out, let's just go for a drive. And ang goal ko doon was to show these musicians, these Filipino rappers, Filipino singers, that they're just regular people. They like this, they like to eat while naka-road trip or something. So it's a different aspect to quote-unquote celebrities, a different look. So this coming elections, naisip ko, you know what, I want to have a more of a participatory role, and meaning I really want to get to know the political candidates na tatakbo sa national and then sa local elections. Yung pwede bang gawin yon na it won't be like electioneering or anything? Can I just still do that, especially on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, Attorney Emil?
If you read the implementing rules ng COMELEC sa Fair Elections Act, you are actually treated as a mass media personality. So pasok kayo doon because you would fall under the category of content creator. So wala namang bawal actually na gawin mo yon. It was just that, for example, the moment you dedicate your YouTube page, for example, to a particular candidate, then it has an implication to that candidate because COMELEC will attribute that YouTube account to the candidate. However, if for example, hindi naman dedicated to a particular candidate and you're giving equal space to different candidates, then hindi naman mag-a-apply yung COMELEC regulations na yun.
Okay, so Attorney Emil, go ahead po. Yes po.
So in other words, it protected speech yan sa part mo. So if you want to interview and also walang pinagbabawal yung batas. Walang bawal sa COMELEC regulations because it's expression yan, freedom of expression yan.
Okay, so I can guess si presidential candidate A, presidential candidate B, and et cetera, et cetera. And Attorney CHEL too, because I see him on TikTok. I love how you hang out and you respond to your followers. So yeah, I see you on TikTok, sir.
Pero sa akin nga, kung sa akin nga dapat magpasalamat pa yung COMELEC sa'yo because you're actually helping the general public na makilala ng mas malalim yung mga kandidato. Hindi ba mas gusto natin yun as against na boboto sila on the basis of fake news or TV commercial lang na hindi naman malalim yung pagpapakilala ng kandidato.
Attorney Emil, if ever lang, since you mentioned that, kasi ang bala ko talaga, because I don't want to be tagged na, you're just taking advantage of the elections, although it would look like that. Ang gusto ko kasi talaga, like, I would get to know the candidate, like how is she or he in person, how regular of a person he or she is. Hindi ba parang matatag yun na pwede ba kung magkunyari, can I make it a little bit political? Or can I just, or do I stick with ito lang, mahilig siya sa kotse, mahilig din siya magmaneho, pag stressed siya, nag-go siya na, nighttime drives. or do I keep it light, or can I go medyo may sabi nga, may ngipin, ganon. Sabi kay Attorney CHEL.
Ngipin yan.
Yeah, actually, wala namang limitation yan. It's actually more of
freedom of expression yan.
Oo, yung nasa sayo yan kung how do you want it presented, do you want to be political or not. But ang punto doon, kahit if you want to become political or be vocal about your stand on different social issues or support a particular candidate, it's still part of protected speech. So, so walang problema yan. Because I think, for example, dun sa DWIZ of Bacolod case, sabi doon ng Supreme Court, ang pwede lang i-regulate ng COMELEC, 3 entities. Candidates, political parties, and franchise holders. Ang hindi ka daw pasok sa 3 na yon, your expression of support to candidates, for or against a candidate, is protected speech. So the Supreme Court is quite clear on that. So even if you endorse candidates on your YouTube page, that's protected speech and protected ka ng batas. Hindi ka pwedeng ipatigil or pakialaman yung content mo because it's your freedom of speech.
Thank you so much, Ares. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Attorney CHEL. Thank you, Attorney Emil.
Thank you.
Okay. Ayan. Go ahead, Attorney CHEL. Merong isa nagtatanong, what can Filipinos do to safeguard the sanctity of the ballot? Yan talaga, kabang-kaba na kami lahat. Dito sa Amerika, kinakabahan sila. Kinakabahan yung mga tao dito.
May related question yan eh. Yung marami rin nagtatanong sa akin kung pwede bang dayain yung computerized election. So yun, I think the public would like to know from Emil.
At saka even here, Attorney Emil, even here, nasa Las Vegas ako ngayon, yung mga taga-Amerika, San Francisco, at saka sa LA, lahat sila. Paano yan, boboto kami paano kung tapos na boxing? Yan ang mga sinasabi nila. So paano? How do you do this? Go ahead.
Well, of course, for the 2022 elections, wala pa tayong data na maipipresent. But insofar as the past elections mula 2010, 13, 16, and 2019 elections, for example, 2019 elections, same machine will be used for the 2022 elections. We have opened a lot of protest cases, different cities, different provinces all over the Philippines. I personally handled yung mga cases na to. And when we went through manual counting of the ballots, nagmamatch po, walang mintis doon sa automated count. So, in a way, medyo mataas yung trust ko because we've seen it with our own eyes. So, bilangin mo by machine or bilangin mo mano-mano, same po yung botong lumalabas. So far, in fact, wala pang protest case na may nakita na the machine actually counted na mali. So, yun yung pinangahawakan ko when I say that so far, there's no indication na madadaya yung machine. However, let's take note na ang makina kasi bulag yan, ay ibig sabihin walang bias yan eh.
Okay.
So ang possible na dayaan is not really in the counting but in the process of voting. For example, may instances ng intimidation, gamit ng force, vote buying, or yung iba ginagawa nila, hina-hold up nila yung buong presinto. In other words, kukunin nila yung balota, sila yung mag-fill up, i-feed nila. Tatawag namin doon shabu, shaded by 1. So in certain areas in Mindanao, for example, in the BARM, lalo na yung hindi mapasok ng militar, hindi mapasok ng election watchdogs, for example, there are some precincts, for example, na walang election, but rather gagawin nila, i-fill up pa nila lahat ng 1,000 ballots, tapos i-feed nila sunod-sunod. So, very, mapapansin mo yan because almost perfect score usually yung, kung sino yung involved doon, makikita mo na perfect score yan. Lahat napunta sa kanya, kalaban niya 0-0, which is statistically impossible. So, there are instances of that, but I would say na if you look at the whole country, it's a very small percentage. Most of the cheating now actually, since the start of the automated election, nag-shift sa vote buying. Kung sabi nila, because of the shift sa automated election, hindi mo na madadaya yung makina, so people would resort now to vote buying. So that's why mas lumaganap daw ang vote buying during the automated election.
What about overseas voting? Nadadaya din, di ba? Here.
Ang napansin ko lang, because I was also an overseas absentee voter before when I studied in London, ang napansin ko lang is, in places, for example, where allowed yung voting by mail, ang problema is when you go to the embassy, you can still vote physically.
Correct.
So there's a possibility actually that you can vote twice.
Right.
So I think kailangan tingnan yan. Kasi naalala ko, I was also sent by mail na balot. Tapos, of course, mas gusto namin na personal ka makapag-feed sa makina sa embassy. Ayun. So, to the information of everybody, mas nauna po ang botohan sa overseas absentee. So, 1 month before election, nagsisimula na yung botohan.
Right.
So, it goes on for 1 month until May 9, nagsasara yan.
Okay.
So, mas nauna po yung election abroad kesa dito sa Pilipinas.
Attorney CHEL, anong update pa? Go ahead.
May tanong naman ako tungkol sa party list. Kasi di ba parang nagiging siya parang nawala na yung purpose niya, which was to give a voice to the marginalized. Oo. Anong take mo dyan, Emil?
Ako kasi, in a way, the reason why the Supreme Court is flip-flopping as regards its interpretation is because the law was badly crafted. I think that the law was a bit ambiguous as regards the nature of the party list. So ako kasi yung konsepto ko ng party list, it should be exclusively reserved for the truly marginalized and underrepresented sectors. Ang nangyari niya, noong 2013 elections, the 6th of Brillantes Commission, yung batch na yon, they reinterpreted the interpretation ng RA 7941. So ginawa ng COMELEC at that time, during our time, sabi ng batch na yon, dapat marginalized na underrepresented lahat. So we were able to remove around 80 party list groups in 2013. So what they did is they went up to the Supreme Court, yung mga natanggal namin, and that became the case of Atong Paglaom, which is now the current standard ng Supreme Court, ng COMELEC sa pag-approve ng party list. So the Atong Paglaom case, the Supreme Court said, na essentially the party list system is open to everyone, whether marginalized ka or hindi, underrepresented ka or hindi. So basically, the Supreme Court in Atong Paglaom opened the system to anyone. So yun yung naging problema, because ang COMELEC din kasi, ang problema is bound din siya doon sa criteria na nilay down ng Supreme Court. Because in Atong Paglaom, nagsabi siya, here are the 6 parameters for party list system. And in a way, talidin yung kamay ng COMELEC as regards those parameters. And those parameters basically open the system to everyone and anyone in the country. Mayaman or mahirap, underrepresented or hindi, marginalized or hindi. So I think the long-term solution is really need to change the party list system law and make it more clearer na it's only for the marginalized and underrepresented.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
May tanong lang. Opo. Attorney CHEL.
Yes.
May tanong para
Go ahead.
Alright. Sabi niya, how's the campaign going? Ano daw challenges mo for the upcoming 2022 elections, especially dyan sa ating mga botante? And any thoughts on recent election developments? Tatlo na kasi we have 3 minutes. Go ahead po, Attorney CHEL.
It's going very well. Nako, salamat sa tanong. Actually, I have been to several sorties na. Siyempre, ingat-ingat lang, social distancing, palaging nakamas, and making sure that we're all, wala masyadong malalaking crowds. Pero it's going well. Bukas nga, ako'y babiyahin naman pa Laguna. At sa mga darating na linggo, hindi ko na alam kung saan ako mapupunta. But this is really something that I'm very happy and optimistic about. Dahil alam niyo, ang dami mga volunteer. Naku, umabot na yata kami ng 14,000 na nag-sign up. At kung meron pang gusto mag-volunteer, you can easily go to my page, my Facebook page, DIOKNO, or go to the link, diokno.ph/volunteer, and you can sign up there. Kung meron naman, kasi marami din humihingi ng mask, di ba yung sutsut kong ipin ng mata. Oo, ano na rin po yan, available na rin po yan online sa to Shopee. So if you're interested, you can also go there. I'm talagang upbeat ako sa mga nangyayari sa atin. Ang saya-saya kasamang mga volunteers. I make it a point na pagka meron akong sortie, kailangan meron din kami sa mga volunteers.
Ang galing. Any word of again, message of hope naman, Attorney Emil, para naman yung ating mga botante talagang maniwala dito sa batas ng mga election lawyers din. Go ahead po. 60 seconds.
Well, una-una po, ang iisip natin, ang success ng election, hindi lang po nakasalalay sa COMELEC, nakasalalay po sa ating lahat. So, importante din po sa atin na mamamayan na dapat tayo magmatsyag, bantayan ang ating boto, yung unahin pag may nakikitang mali sa parte ng COMELEC or dapat ma-improve, at saka po maging vigilant po tayo. I think this coming election is a very important election for all of us. So, ayun po, let's play a more active role yung para maipanalo po natin yung mga kandidato na sa palagay natin yung karapat-dapat po.
Alright, maraming salamat. Ulitin po, Attorney Emil Marañon, siya pong election lawyer. Attorney CHEL, 60-seconder, go ahead, your message of hope.
Huwag natin kakalimutan na dapat lagyan natin ng kagat ang hustisya. Dapat talaga may ngipin ng batas. Alam nyo, ang dami ko nakikita sa pakikipag-usap ko kay Attorney Emil at sa iba't ibang mga grupo, mga sektor, mga ibang abogado. Ang dami pa rin pagkukulang pagdating sa hustisya dito sa atin. Kaya I'm very determined. Talagang kailangan maayos natin ang katarungan dito sa atin para lahat naman ay mabigyan ng hustisya. Minsan kasi parang di ba, feeling natin ay medyo may pagka-double standard ang justice dito sa atin. Dapat wala na yan. I'm dedicating my life really to making sure that we have justice for all. Dapat ang hustisya ay para sa lahat.
Maraming salamat. Yan ay matitikman yung pangil. Ay, hindi na pangil. Hinipin lang ni Attorney CHEL. God bless everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maraming salamat. Thank you.
Salamat po.
Si Miss Lolly Acosta, Sulong na Bayan sa DWIZ 882.